So I'm out riding today on this beautiful day on this beautiful road, and I thought I'd make an update video on my Yamaha Super Tenere. It's been just over 1 year and 14,000 miles, and so I just wanted to make a video with going over, you know, what I like, what I don't like, and whether I'd buy the bike again. So straight off the bat, I'll just say that I've owned about 17 motorcycles, I think. I spent a few years just buying and selling bikes to figure out what I really liked, and I would say that this is probably the best street bike I've ever owned. And I'd go as far as to say that I wouldn't take any other bike over this one, new or used, at the moment. It just suits my needs perfectly. So as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of this bike. It's probably not the best at doing any one thing, but for my needs, which are commuting, touring, and fun weekend rides like this, as well as riding in all sorts of weird conditions, it just works so well. So what do I like about this bike? In the last video that I made with my first impressions, that you can check out on the screen, I said that this engine was probably one of the best street engines I've ever used, and I still stand by that. It's just so torquey and smooth that you can be in almost any gear and almost any RPM and it'll just pull. You rarely have to downshift, and it's just easy to ride. It's not one of those engines that really begs to be revved, where it feels unhappy at low RPMs, but if you do rev it out, it's super fun. It sounds great, it has plenty of power throughout the rev range, and yeah, it's just something that's easy to ride whether you're kind of commuting, cruising, riding harder. So it kind of works for all types of riding, and I love this engine. The other thing that I really like is the comfort. I've got a huge windscreen, I've got wide bars, low pegs so my knees don't hurt, and a wide seat. And so you can just really ride this bike pretty much all day. And I've done that a few times. I rode from Bay Area, California out to Denver, Colorado, which was 1,508 miles that I did in just over 23 hours. I did this for an iron butt ride, where the goal is just ride over 1,500 miles in under 24 hours. So I didn't stop at all except for fuel, no rest stops or anything else. And I mean, the bike is just so easy to ride. It just, you know, you just kind of sit there. It does the work for you. And 3 days later, I rode 1,280 miles back home from Denver to the Bay Area, California in 20 hours. Again, just stopping for fuel, nothing else. Just turn on the cruise control, let the bike do its thing. So the other thing that I enjoy about this bike is it handles pretty well for what it is, you know? It is a 600+ pound motorcycle with all the luggage on it, but I mean, for fun rides like this, where I'm not just trying to go as fast as possible, it does more than well enough. And honestly, I don't ride that fast on the street because I'm just, you know, always have to kind of worry about road conditions, like that loose gravel sign over there, traffic, etc. And so I'm not really looking to push myself that fast. And even if I was on a faster motorcycle, I wouldn't be going any faster than I am now. So this bike doesn't really make me wish that I had less weight or more power or anything when it comes to just handling. The big bars make it easy to turn into corners. The upright seating position kind of gives you a great view of the road, so it's easy to ride. Now the weight does really disappear once you're going above 5 or 10 miles an hour, and that weight also really helps when it comes to wind, rain, having a passenger, luggage, etc. And so it just makes it easy to ride this bike in all conditions. And finally, I just like that it's so reliable. The valve check intervals are 26,000 miles, so you don't have to really worry about them too often. And you know, I did mine at 24,000. It was fairly involved just because the engine is wedged so far into the frame that you have to end up taking out things like the front motor mount and moving brake lines just to get the valve cover off. So it is a little involved to work on, but it's been so reliable that all it's needed are, you know, the valve check. I did spark plugs, air filter, all the fluids, and it's been great. And from what I've seen online, these bikes run basically forever. So I'm expecting many more miles from this motorcycle. Okay, so what do I not like about this bike? Well, the first thing would be the throttle response. And the first 11 months or so, till about last month, I was riding this in touring mode just because sport mode is so, I guess, jumpy. It's really hard to roll on the throttle smoothly, especially if you're trying to go slow. If you're, you know, lane splitting or trying to go 5 to 10 miles an hour and you're constantly on and off the throttle, it will end up jumping a lot if you're not smooth with your wrist. So it's just kind of, you can see it kind of just wants to go as soon as I move the throttle a little bit. And because it's a cable throttle, there's a lot of free play here that's required, and so it kind of makes it even harder to modulate the throttle smoothly. It also is pretty finicky, where it'll stall if you're not, you know, just right with the throttle. If you're trying to be too gentle with it and you're not trying to, you know, over rev the bike or anything, or you don't want that sudden abrupt jerkiness, it'll stall, and it's kind of frustrating. So I end up having to give a little bit more throttle than I'd want to otherwise while starting off. Oh, I read that this is a pretty big complaint with well, these bikes, so I'm not surprised. And other Yamahas that I've owned have had this kind of similar issue where it's just extremely jumpy. So you can see I'm not even moving my wrist that much, and the bike is just surging forward. And if you're kind of in a low speed corner and you're trying to get on the throttle smoothly, it can be pretty challenging, and the bike can kind of buck around, and it's not the most confidence inspiring. The second thing that I don't really like is going to be the weight. Now, I did say that the weight is kind of a pro, but that's when it's moving. When it's not moving or barely rolling, it's a little heavy. Moving it around in the garage or trying to push it around, you can feel all 600 plus pounds of it, and it can be kind of challenging to ride, especially if you're still kind of new to the bike, while lane splitting and trying to squeeze through tight spaces at low speeds. And don't ask me how I know this, but if you're trying to be lazy and rock the bike off the center stand in first gear so you can dump the clutch and just start riding off as soon as the bike falls off the stand, if you try and do that but then you accidentally stall and the bike starts tipping over very slowly, there's pretty much no saving it. Don't ask me how I know that. That was a hard lesson to learn. The third thing that I don't like about the bike is the controls. Obviously I just covered the throttle and how jerky it is, but the clutch, while it's very smooth, even after a clutch hydraulic fluid change, it's still very heavy. And it's not bad when you're just shifting it once in a while, but if you're kind of on and off the clutch a lot, feathering it to, you know, ride through traffic or, you know, splitting lanes, it can get pretty painful, and I've definitely gotten an arm pump from that before. The shifter is also pretty notchy, especially as the oil gets a little older and it's due for a change. It gets very notchy, and I found that it doesn't really like Rotella. So I've had to put the more expensive OEM Yamaha lube in, and it can add up if you're riding fairly regularly. Also kind of related to that, because the exhaust on the left side kind of bulges out, there's a heat shield, and so I can't get my foot all the way back on the peg, which means that in left-hand corners, if I'm, you know, kind of aggressive enough, I'll start scraping my boots well before my pegs would ever touch. And so it's kind of annoying, but I do have size 13 feet, so maybe that's just a me problem. Either way, it's kind of disconcerting when you're just riding around and your boots start hitting the ground. So I kind of wish there was a little bit more room there, but it's fine. It's just a nitpick. And the last nitpick that I have is the fuel gauge. This has a 6-gallon fuel tank, but the reserve turns on at around 4 gallons, which means you have another 80-ish miles before you actually need gas. And so I kind of wish that the reserve turned on at maybe 5 gallons with a gallon left, because I feel like it's too conservative, and when you're riding cross country and you're in the middle of nowhere, last thing you want to see is the reserve light turn on, especially when you have plenty of fuel left. I've ridden 40, 50, 60 miles into the reserve and still only have put in, you know, 5 gallons of gas. So I kind of wish the reserve was a little bit more realistic, but it's easy enough to plan around, especially because you can just kind of guesstimate how far you've gone on a tank with your trip meter. Anyway, those are just small nitpicks. The jumpy throttle, I'm hoping, can be resolved with a new tune, and I have actually purchased a 2-wheel Dynoworks tune, so I just have to mail in my ECU. Hopefully I'll do that soon, and I'm hoping that will really fix the throttle issue. The other issues, you know, it's not a huge deal, like the clutch being a little heavy. At least it's smooth, it's self-adjusting, so I can't complain too much. And the foot position issue is just really a me problem, or if you have similarly sized feet. If you don't, or if you're not really riding the bike that hard in corners, then you're probably never even going to notice it. So yeah, I mean, I barely have any real issues with this. As for modifications, what I've done to the bike over the past year, I did install my Diode Dynamics running lights. I just feel like that's very important to have on any motorcycle that you're commuting on quite a bit. Just having extra lights for people to see you, always a good idea. I also added some reflective stickers on all the luggage in the back. I installed heated grips, and I actually have a video showing how I installed the OEM Yamaha heated grips. But the issue is, after about 3 weeks, those $300+ grips, the wire actually ended up breaking on the right side where it goes into the grip. And so that was kind of a huge waste of money, unfortunately. So I went with these Casso Apollo grips. I've had them on other bikes, they always work well. The controller is very well integrated right here, and it has 5 levels of heat settings, and they work just fine. If you're wondering why I have such a big gap right here on the right side between the throttle cable housing and the grip, it's because I changed this housing out to a 1st gen Super Tenere throttle housing, just because it's a little smaller. The 1st gens didn't have the integrated heated grip wiring thing that made it a lot bulkier. I just didn't like the look of it, so I went with a much slimmer version, but I do have this gap. It doesn't bother me, but that might be something that you don't like. I also added a toolbox. It's a Givi S150 knockoff that I got from AliExpress for about 70 bucks. I can fit in my tools, an air compressor, tire, plug kit, and a few other things. Super useful. It mounts behind my luggage so you can barely even see it's there, and it just stays out of the way. Also from AliExpress, I bought these little wind guards, and they actually do make a pretty big difference. It really reduces the amount of air that kind of hits you in the chest. So I recommend these, especially for like 15-20 bucks where they were. I also added this Peak Design phone mount just so I can plop my phone on there for directions and anything else that I need. And finally, I installed a Vantrue F1 dash cam. That's what this thing is. I'm still working on a installation and review video, but so far it's been pretty good, and with the amount that I've been riding, I just figured it was a good idea to have a dash cam running at all times. It's pretty well integrated and stays out of the way, so you know, no complaints with it so far. So overall, I really like this motorcycle. I think for my uses, it's been perfect. And yeah, I have no other real complaints with it, and just no want or reason or need to ever upgrade. In fact, I would like something like an MT-09, like a sporty naked bike, but I just don't think it would do anything better than this can on the street at the speeds I'm willing to go. And it does a lot of things worse, like not having enough luggage space, not being as comfortable, etc. As for other bikes, so when I was looking for a new motorcycle last year after I blew up my previous motorcycle, I was considering the Tenere 700, I was considering the Africa Twin, and the S1000 XR. Now the Tenere 700 was too new and still was going for way too much money even used, so I actually got the Super Tenere for less money than the Tenere 700. And same with the Africa Twin, is just a little bit out of my budget, so those two got crossed off the list. The S1000 XR was in my budget, but being a BMW, I was a little scared of buying it. But I actually have a friend who bought both an R1250 GS and an S1000 XR, so I got to ride those back to back with the Super Tenere to kind of see what I thought of them. The R1250 GS, I will admit, rides a little bit better in the tightest of twisty roads. R1250 GS kind of hid its weight a little bit better, I think probably because of its fancy front suspension or something. But in terms of controls, the engine, the overall looks, I still prefer this bike, and obviously I'm very biased. But even if the R1250 is a better bike, for the price premium that you have to pay for that versus what I paid for this, I just don't think it's a good value. I think this is a much better motorcycle for the money. As for the S1000 XR, it is a similarly priced motorcycle, and I did get to ride it, and I think it's an amazing bike. But for me, I think it just has too much power that I wouldn't end up really using, and it's just not as comfortable as this bike. So for things that I like to do, like long iron butts, I just don't think I would enjoy that motorcycle as much. On these twisty roads like this, that bike is pretty much perfect. It really just wants to turn into corners. The engine is super smooth, easy to use. It's a little torquier than the S1000 RR engine, and so it just makes it a lot easier to ride on the street. However, as much as I like that bike and its quick shifter and the engine, I just still feel more at home on this. So no regrets at all buying this over the XR. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the 2016 Yamaha Super Tenere. I absolutely love this motorcycle. If you're on the fence about buying one and your use cases sound similar to mine, I would 100% recommend it. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I'll probably include some riding footage from some of the more twisty roads that I'll hopefully end up getting to later today. See ya!